I agree, 2000%. And what you're speaking of is being exacerbated as we get further and further away from the arts, as the world becomes more and more overpopulated and more competitive, and economically more and more strained globally, including the very powerful developed economies of this world. So what? Well, it's made us already, not future tense, current tense, is the professional degrees, which for a very, very long time have held status and cachet in the world. It's nice to talk around the barbecue. Oh, my son's doing LLB, or my daughter's doing accounting, and so on. People love that.
Great to meet you here on Zoom, David.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for asking me to do this. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, I'm very intrigued about what you do. I read on the website a little bit about what you do. And I also read that you're a deep thinker, a committed doer, and a talented creative.
Okay.
What a great compliment to get.
Yes, yeah. I think that was Fred Rode who said that about me. Yeah, he's all of those as well. So that's
is it?
it's a compliment coming from him.
Just explain to me a little bit. I mean, I went on your website, I read a lot about what you do, but it's all very much business lingo. So explain for a blonde 59-year-old woman in Vienna, what exactly is it that you do?
Okay, so I've worked in higher education for 20 years. And all of that time I've worked for, in fact, not all of that, most of that time I've worked for large, privately owned, for-profit tertiary education providers.
Okay.
And that are run like, commercial businesses. They are commercial businesses. And so what I've experienced in all of them, and this is not a judgment on them, it's a tough thing. That's why it exists, is often a misalignment and a fault line between the educational priorities and the commercial priorities. So the balance sheet and teaching and learning. And because of that, what happens is that there are their vocabularies that are different from the business speak and the educational speak, and that's fine. However, because of the misaligned priorities between those two constituencies, often what happens is trust is compromised and resentment is high, because the educators think that the bean counters are being tight-fisted and are being obstructive, and the bean counters, whose KPIs are protection of the business to sustain it, to be able to offer the education for a long time, ideally forever, feel that the educators don't have the requisite business acumen to be able to, with regard to their budgets and with regard to, the deployment of new infrastructure or new technologies into advanced teaching and learning. And so what my business does is serves as a translator and a superconductor almost between the educators and the business people within education providers, and that's both academic and corporate education,
Okay.
to assist in getting a better balance between learning excellence and financial performance.
And I think between those two also, it's the learners that are affected.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the faculty and the staff. Because oftentimes the emphasis, for good reason, in an educational environment is on student success and student well-being.
Yeah.
And my view is, what about the staff?
Mm-hmm.
And the staff is the collective of the teaching faculty and, of course, all of the administration and business and operations colleagues who, without them, there would be no teaching and learning, there would be no student experience, there would be no curricula, there would be no support, etc. And agnostic of industry or sector or organization is, that the better shape the staff are in, the happier the staff are, the more creative and enthusiastic and vital the climate of that organization is. It can't not positively impact the student experience and the student outcomes. And so these are the kind of things that we pay close attention to. And the subtext to all of this is that my definition of an organization is the sum of its bottlenecks and diverse perspectives. So we speak about diversity, for example, often quite simplistically. When we think of and talk about diversity, we think of race and gender primarily as the two main things that come to mind. However, as you can see behind me, the livery of learning advisory, those are all lenses.
Oh, okay.
And they represent the diverse perspectives of the human condition, individually and in groups. And what makes life and learning and education so challenging and exciting is it's a constant experience for every one of us of sense making, because I have a perspective and a worldview, you have a perspective and a worldview. When they align, it's relatively easy. When they don't, it's more challenging. And so I'm of the view that the broader my situational awareness is, meaning I'm aware of myself in the world as opposed to myself as the world.
Okay.
I'm much more aware, very, very visually, very physically, very literally, and cognitively, emotionally, etc., of the world around me, and that my worldview is exactly that. It is a worldview. It's not the worldview. And so I have opinions, some of them quite strong, and I have fears, and I have likes and dislikes just like everybody else. And my ongoing practice is to continually bring greater and greater awareness, situational awareness, into my being in the world. So not just my doing, but my being in the world, how I am and what I do and why I do it, how I do it, with whom I do it, etc. So this is a long answer to quite a simple question, and that's why the mission and the purpose of learning advisory is to help academic and corporate learning providers balance learning excellence and sustained financial performance.
this is, I think, also a problem with the private education facilities, is that they have to also, or they put out the numbers, but the students are not prepared for real life. For they are educated, but there's a gap between real life and going into the industry and being a student. So is that also something that you cover?
Yes, indeed. So it's not just the privates. That's one of the greatest challenges of education. And it leaves many educators and education providers quite bewildered as to how to improve that. So what we do in learning advisory is we focus on learning more than knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the continually increasing, expanding our ability to learn with the principle that if I am continually paying attention to my current and continually advancing ability to learn, not just as a student at school or an undergraduate student, people like you and I, and everybody else, is that the principle is that the more mindful I am and more on purpose I am with my learning and my ability to learn and expanding my ability to learn, that then the context of learning, which is clearly a huge influence on what, when, and how we learn, becomes far less of a hindrance. And so if I become aware, and we've built an application to assist with this, it's called Learn Smartly. And what it does is it's designed using neuroscience, Jungian orientation, and the Enneagram for any person to establish their learning preferences and by association, their non-preferences. I'll give you an example. So if I'm in an environment or in front of a facilitator, and that might be a lecturer or a master class or my manager, or subject matter that I don't like, the likelihood of me shutting down is high.
Oh, yeah.
Or becoming less receptive. Clearly, the less receptive I am, the less available I am to learn and to absorb and to retain and reflect and ultimately, where appropriate, apply. And this is what you're speaking to, is that we're focusing on curriculum, and we don't have an alternative for that. Alternatives exist. There are other ways to learn without the scaffolding of a traditional semester and curriculum and tests and exams and stuff. And some people are doing great things with this. But the majority of the educational system, both basic and vocational and higher education, and even to some degree in workplace learning and development programs, the curriculum still is front and center.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why an organization like the Waldorf schools, the Montessori schools, their methodology, their anthroposophical methodology, is the underpinning of whatever they teach their students. So the curriculum isn't the true north. Their methodology, their educational and pastoral methodology is the thing. And then the curriculum is nested within that. And I think that's a beautiful model because it nurtures creativity, and it nurtures agency, and it nurtures the development of the human being, not just the human doing or the human knowing.
If I can just interrupt you there, because I just recently spoke to a singer, opera singer, who went to a Waldorf school, and her whole approach, and she's very young, and her whole approach to her career, to singing, to how she practices, and she said that it's because of that education that she had, that how she sees her career. And I thought, amazing, at such a young age, that she already had that wisdom, and that she knew where she, how she had to approach the career. So I had a real life example of, spoke to a real life example of that system.
That's beautiful. I find, and by the way, I'm not endorsed or backed or sponsored or anything by Waldorf schools. I find that in my career, working with people who are alumni of the Waldorf school system, they have a maturity and a kindness about them. It's not this hey shoo wow kumbaya thing. I think a lot of people have a belief that that's what it is. It's a little bit weird and so on. My experience of graduates of that educational methodology are that they have a self-belief, but it's not a smug and arrogant thing at all. It's a very beautiful thing. I think we need more of that kind of methodology. It's almost more of a lifestyle than an education per se.
Yeah, it makes this interview actually was so interesting for me, not just when we talked about that, but just about everything she did. And that's what you say. It's it's not that it's not as if they want to impress you. It's just it's something in their being that it's just very impressive.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it's a centeredness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you, but carry on.
No, you didn't. You didn't. I just wanted to share this with you. I recently read this, and this is from the creative force that we know as Pharrell Williams, the musician. And he said, creativity without business is usually victimization. And business without creativity is a waste of time. I'll read that again. Creativity without business is usually victimization. And business without creativity is a waste of time. And I share that because just like in our work that I shared with you earlier, we're working to connect common rifts between educators and business people in the same ecosystems that are colleagues. A real turning point for me was I'd been in the music industry. I was a music producer, and then I segued from that into being a mastering engineer, audio mastering engineer. And that was when I opened my first business in my early 30s. And I was arguably quite an archetype creative person. And the archetype is as a belief, an inheritance almost, that I can't be creative and financially sustained. I have to suffer for my art. And I'm not saying that all creative people believe this or live their lives like this. I did, and I know many people who do and continue to do, even peers of mine who, in their middle age now. And I had dinner one evening with friends, and one of my friends referred to his parents as having a poverty complex. Mm. And it struck me, it was like a sucker punch. I was like, I've got one of those. And my parents have got one of those. My parents, my father's no longer alive, but throughout growing up, always felt sort of quite claustrophobic, quite sort of tight-fisted. I now know it was prudent and frugality. This poverty complex, and I thought, yeah, I've got that, and what's that about? And I realized that I had a core belief that I couldn't be creative and financially comfortable. I could be one or the other. And that I hadn't even really realized it, to be honest. It was a largely unconscious thing that I just, suffering for your art was how it was. Mm. And the reason I'm sharing this was that conversation was pivotal in my life, because and particularly in my mindset, because I thought, where did that come from? Because nobody's told me that. My parents had different vocations, so it's not like they told me that or I watched them doing that, etc. So I thought, well, it's true if that's what I have it to be or want it to be or maintain it to be. And I thought, well, that's not how I want to live my life. So I set about changing that. And it wasn't this dogged, read all the business books and, walk down Wall Street. It wasn't like that. It was just, it was an unlearning, if you will, of this mindset. And over time, and not a very long time, I started to keep doing what I loved and getting paid for it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel embarrassed. And I wasn't greedy. My value system didn't change. My mindset changed. And I have benefited from that conversation in 2003 ever since. And that's 21 years ago now. And I just wanted to share that because for your audience, for any of people who are creators, and that doesn't just mean poets, musicians, painters, writers. It can be any vocation. It's not true that you can't earn a good living from what you do, from your art, from your contribution. And it's about believing that to be so, and then working very proactively to monetize your time. And I'm not suggesting that's easy. It isn't. But if it is an intentional practice, it comes for sure, and it'll probably come into your being and into your earnings, etc., faster than you can imagine.
But you said now that that it was not something that you heard about the suffering artist, but do you think, or I heard sometimes, and especially in South Africa, where people say, well, even I spoke to a few young school children where they said, well, I can't do art. I can't become an artist or a painter I can't do drama because there's not a lot of work and it's not financially a stable career. So sometimes you hear that from parents saying to their children, well, you should become a lawyer because being an artist is not a stable career. And I even had that with my children who did ballet, where people used to say to me, well, they have to have a backup, they have to have an education, because ballet is not a long career. Yet they were both employed, and now my daughter retired, and she is now studying something, and she's a good student, and she's and this is because of her career in ballet. I think it's that discipline, and it's everything this art form. I can see absolutely everything this art form gave her to become what she is now. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could teach different art forms in school alongside all these subjects, so that all these skills that pursuing an art brings, that could be applied to all the other subjects, so that we don't have this vision in society that, oh, the suffering artist, oh, he has to beg for his money, or we can pay him little because the art gallery has to get the money, that sort of outlook.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're really good at stereotypes and pigeonholes and being binary, either or. And what you've just said is just spot on. And I think that's the thing, is if we say something, especially with a loud voice, a loud assertive voice, it makes it so.
Yeah.
And we see it every day on social media, where it's easy, everybody's an expert.
Mm.
And what I think drives so much of these mindsets and behaviors is fear.
Mm-hmm.
Fear about, we talk a lot about sustainability in the context of, reducing the degree that we've already messed up the planet. That sustainability generally brings that. But we don't talk a lot about sustainability of the soul.
Exactly.
And sustainability in our personal contexts and our family contexts is generally, and I'm so mindful that the structures of sustainability are very, very culturally influenced, culturally contextual. And that providing for your future, whether that's by having an extended family, or saving in the context of the traditional type of pension or investments type of instruments. But a lot of it's fear-based. And I'm not suggesting that planning or providing for one's future is not an important thing. But what a lot of times, I think we're in a state of fear so much of the time, we desensitize to it, which is slightly ironic, because fear is what drives our stress and our preoccupation with not having enough, and that it's never enough. What's my point? Is that for parents, for example, if my child wants to be creative, there's generally a proviso, oh, it's because they're not academically inclined.
Exactly.
Well, that's nonsense. I know and have taught and have engaged with a whole lot of very, very creative people who are academically also high achievers. I've also dealt with and taught many, many academically high achieving people who struggle to express themselves. Again, not because they're stupid or incapable.
Yeah.
And so I guess the question is, what is required of me? What is required of us? And us can be our family or our neighborhood or our team at work or our organization or our peer group. To acknowledge the inherent anxiety of the human condition. That's also hugely influenced by our context. What is required of me to express myself in a way that is honest and fulfilling, while being mindful that it is one approach. It's one true north. And equally, what is required of me to be more discerning about the volume of opinion and instruction and absoluteness that I'm seeing, hearing, reading, and even feeling every single day of my life. What is required of me to be more discerning in my processing and reflection of all of that possibility, to not lose myself in it, and equally not to be bolshy, and in my quest to be more honestly myself, not to be provy and sort of forceful about that.
Yeah. Well, I to just continue with what you're saying, I did a project in lockdown where I photographed 500 artists in their windows, and I also spoke to most of them. And this is actually why I'm doing this project also, is because what I found really interesting was how they overcame this situation. And remember, they couldn't perform because the theaters were closed for the whole time, and even a long time afterwards as well. But how they just adjusted and just coped with the situation and reinvented themselves in a way, doing and figuring out a way to do things. And that really struck me, because you heard a lot of people complaining always on the news and everywhere. Yet every time I came to an artist, they had dire situations. Really, some of them really had very difficult situations, but they seem to have cope with it. They seem to sort of make a plan and get on with it. And this is what really made me think, what do they have? What is that in their way of thinking, these skills, to overcome things? And this is why I then thought, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if we can teach children to do art, any form of art, just to equip them with things that they have to do later in life, and even if you speak to, I speak to a conductor who conducts a youth orchestra, and if he tells me the advantages of a child playing in a youth orchestra, the music is really not the main focus. The main focus, there's so many other things, and you think, if we could have that sort of environment in the corporate world, how wonderful people would work together, how cultures would come together. It's just,
Yeah.
a great solution.
Yes, indeed. I'm going to paraphrase a couple of colleagues of mine. They're of the view, and I am too, that we've lost our ability, and this is particularly in formalized organizations, so call that organizational life, the world of work, jobs, etc. We've lost our ability to play.
Mm.
We've lost our... One of my pet peeves is all of the rhetoric around agile and innovation and lean and all of this. I hear it, almost every day. I read about it almost every day. Fail fast, fail forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I see so little of that sandboxing, that prototyping, that practicing, not for a laugh, but to build new stuff for specific reasons, to advance our organization in whatever ways we want to advance the organization. And my belief is that there are numerous reasons. There are two particularly pertinent reasons, though, for the lack of creativity and the lack of risk appetite, if you will, just to go for it, is because people in organizations and organizations themselves are so tethered to KPIs and short-termism, the next 6 to 12 months of the current financial year. And a great article I read quite a few years ago now, the title of it is Large Organizations is Where Creativity Goes to Die. And I appreciate it. I appreciate the reality of the complexities and the needs of large organizations relative to small, armies of one or small little organizations, which can be much more agile. They're fewer because there is less risk, because there are fewer people involved. There's there's less of everything involved in decision making and reputational protection. Like, I get that. None of that's lost on me. However, the fear of getting into trouble is the hindrance in inherently creative people, which is probably every single one of us. That the fear of getting into trouble prevents us from really being creative, expressing our creativity, again, not just for the sake of it, but in service of the organization and what we're talking about in the meetings, and we're talking about in our strategic plans and other documents and so on. So as you can hear, I feel quite strongly about this, because what happens is it's the constriction of agency. I refer to it as oxygen, because what's interesting, you spoke earlier about the literally going to ground of the world, and artists really suffered in that, because for many of them it shut off their access, people's access to them and there to there, etc., and also revenues as a result. What's interesting, however, is I've spoken to many artists, and particularly musicians, who produced the most inspiring work for them that they'd done in years, for some of them in decades. And I saw in our own home and in many other homes of friends, families, colleagues, the abundance of creativity. Absolutely. Because we were forced into a different mindset and schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. This is exactly, you see people, I saw here in the park close to me, children sitting on the grass knitting. It was a thing. The children went out in little groups and they sat there and knit. And I thought, when last did you see that, And you saw on Facebook how people started baking, how they started cooking. And that made me also realize these are all forms of art. There's so much art as part of our lives. I mean, if you just think the wine that you're drinking, it's art. It's a form of art. And
Yes.
and this is also what I'm delving in. What is art? It's so part of our lives, yet we cannot when we start with education, we cannot put it aside. We cannot say, well, we'll take an hour a week for singing, or we'll take, the children who's doing the art lessons in school, they are not as important as the sport, or maths and science should be focused on rather than singing in the choir. And those types of things, I think, that's old fashioned, that's last century, that should be not part of the education system anymore.
I agree, 2000%. And what you're speaking of is being exacerbated as we get further and further away from the arts, as the world becomes more and more overpopulated and more competitive, and economically more and more strained globally, including the very powerful developed economies of this world. So what? Well, it's made us already, not future tense, current tense, is the professional degrees, which for a very, very long time have held status and cachet in the world. It's nice to talk around the barbecue. Oh, my son's doing LLB, or my daughter's doing accounting, and so on. People love that.
Well, I must say, people used to say to me, when I say my children are ballet dancers, they say, but what are their real jobs?
There you go. All right. There you go.
Yeah.
And okay, so how did they earn their money?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
the amazing thing is that as we become more and more skills focused, the assumption, even though we're hearing about the rate of change and we're experiencing the rate of change every single day, what's intriguing to me is that the 3 and sometimes even 4-year bachelor degree is still a thing. When people of all generations have a concentration span of a Brussels sprout now, we're so overwhelmed with information and possibility. We're all suffering, whether we're 5 years old or 500 years old, from decision making and general cognitive fatigue. That these degrees are still years and years long, which doesn't mirror the rate of change. Yes, fundamentals generally stick around for long periods of time, but that's why, going back to the earlier part of this conversation, our focus is on learning, not on knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
Because, in formal academic research, what it is the ever evolving, ever building of knowledge. And that's a beautiful thing. But it's an indication that knowledge is not static. And neither is learning. So learning is very idiosyncratic. It's highly contextual. Quick example. If I'm in a work environment and I trust my boss, the likelihood of me being more open, more creative, and presenting more of my voice is quite high relative to if I experience my boss as autocratic, and as a result, I don't trust him or her. The likelihood of me shutting down, becoming unreceptive, becoming resentment, and either being an under-contributor or leaving, whichever, it'll be one of those things, no doubt, whichever comes first, or both. And learning is exactly the same. How often have you heard somebody's doing a program and, I hate maths, or I hate theory. I don't want to mess around with theory. I just want to get on with pulling the levers and flicking the switches to make stuff happen. That's cool. That's fine. But I've just drawn a blank of who the originator of it is, but I'll share the quote anyway. There's nothing as practical as a good theory.
Oh, yeah.
So what happens is these legacy things. So theory is boring and unnecessary. I just want to do. Okay. Learning how things work so that you don't kill yourself or somebody else when you pull a lever or flick a switch, whether you're actually in a factory or at a desk. That's quite important stuff. And so the scaffolding of learning is important. You see, the thing is, if I have a continuous learning mindset, that generally means I'm receptive, more like I'm receptive, right? I want to continue learning. I don't believe I know it all, and I don't want to actually know it all because I know I don't know it all, and I just want to continue evolving my my worldview, my skill set, and of course my contribution. So as you can hear, Petra, I can talk about this all day long, is learning is such that's our focus in the work that we do. Because knowledge comes and goes, and knowledge is also contextual. So I might do an LLB and then never practice law. My ability to learn and grapple with complex concepts and hopefully be able to apply some of them, that's powerful, because then I might move from law to something completely unrelated. The knowledge context is different, all right? But the learning ability and learning adaptability and learning receptiveness context doesn't change, particularly if I don't want it to. Meaning I want to be awake, I want to be receptive, and so on. And then one last thing, as a way to go, okay, well, all right, so you've talked a lot. What are you doing about it? So again, with our Learn Smartly instrument, what we do is and advocate is not left brain, right brain. We might be predominant, so there's the 4 quadrants of the brain, and one generally is predominant in one, sometimes 2 of the 4 quadrants, not generally all 4. That's fine. So you may be more left brain or right brain in the traditional speak. But what about the other quadrants of the brain that are not so your natural setting, if you will? There's a whole lot of opportunity and engagement and progression for you and your contribution in that space. So that's what we're focusing on, is grappling with, it's easy to talk about reimagining learning. What does that even mean? Why do we even need to? What we're interested in is reimagining learning experiences, not to be special or cute or clever, but because there's more than enough evidence that many learning experiences at all strata of education and in the workplace are very vanilla. Why? Because people's levels of engagements and enthusiasm and participation are at all-time lows. And we can blame smartphones and Generation Z and all of this. That's lazy. What are we doing to adapt? To your point about artists in COVID, you can sit and sulk in your window with dry paint or a broken strings on your guitar. That's not going to make you feel happy. That you're contributing nothing to your soul or to the world. And I always believe that innovation is put on a pedestal. So when we think of innovation, immediately we think of people like Steve Jobs and other people like this. And they were remarkable innovators. However, the rest of us, who make up the vast majority of the planet, are not that smart. And so when do we innovate? Well, it depends on how you define innovate. What we do is we adapt generally pretty quickly, some less so, but generally the human condition adapts quickly to a crisis. Mm. And that's what brings about change. So across the world, learning institutions who could afford it, and that doesn't mean all of them, who could afford it, pivoted very, very quickly from being face-to-face brick and mortar learning environments to virtual. Why? Mm. Because they wanted to continue teaching their existing student populations, and we didn't know how long COVID was going to last, and we wanted to not alienate new sort of commencing students or inquiring students. So what we do, we pivot, because we can't afford, not just from the educational project, but from the financial project, we can't afford to not pivot. So we made that investment. And the interesting thing is, within a period of 1 or 2 weeks across the world, many institutions made the change and incorporated modalities and technologies and stuff that they'd been talking about for years. Mm. But nothing like a good crisis to really force change. Mm. Get on with it. You're left with few options now. Go for it.
And I think also, this was also what I thought a lot about when I talked to, and even now when I talk to artists, is Timeframe. That we talk about them literally starting their career at the age of 4 sometimes, starting with music lessons, carrying on, and then going through their and many say through the teenage years, they sort of wasn't sure, and then they carried on. But their dedication or their perseverance, and sometimes knowing I'm not going to I'm not going to reach that goal till I'm about 30, and still going on. And I think we live in a world that's so instant, and for children, they want to now be something or somebody. They want to be something, and they want to be it next week. They don't want that. They can't see that time frame. And this is so important also I think in education, that there must be something where you can see a longer term, that it's not just the next 6 months, but you say, okay, the next 10 years, I'm not sure exactly how it's going to pan out, but I know this is where I want to end up. So I'm going with the flow, basically, and that is. But just something else I wanted to also mention to you, which what I also think about a lot is the me in society now. What do I want, and what can I achieve, and what do I have, and so on. Whereas with artists, I find it's very much the fact that they want to touch somebody in the audience. They do all this. Yes, also because they enjoy it, but there's always this thing where when you ask them, so what is it about the art form that, what do you want to achieve? And then they always have this comment of, if I can touch one person in the audience, that makes me happy. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we had that, whatever we do, even in business, whatever we do, we think, okay, it's not about the car that I'm going to drive, but it's going to be about the person I'm going to help, or somebody that I'm going to make their life easier.
Yeah, I love that. I think I've got I really endeavor not to be binary in my thinking and my doing and my reflections. Of course, I am. It's tricky to get away from that, but I really push myself to minimize that. One thing that I am quite binary about is my relationship with capitalism. And at any moment, I flip-flop effortlessly between completely loathing capitalism and equally embracing it. And John Foster Pedley, who I know you hosted on your podcast recently, he talks about not confusing profit and profiteering. And that's around, traditional monetary profit. And of course, in that case, the context is focusing on the purpose of what this organization is doing, as opposed to the balance sheet guiding what the organization is doing, which is the tail wagging the dog, and that often happens. Coming back to your very important point, is we've lost a lot of our altruism as people, and I think it's particularly acute in urban areas. So, for example, when I go and visit my sister in the Karoo, and I go to other remote parts of the world, I find that the relationship with money and community is very different. So my sister does quite a lot of bartering, a la centuries past. I make this, you make that. I need a bit of that, you need a bit of what I do, and we share.
Yeah.
And there's that undertone, that climate of helpfulness and sharing.
And support, yeah.
Exactly. And that's what you're speaking to. And it goes back to what I was discussing earlier about, it's incredible how fear is such a massive driver. And I think we desensitize to that fear because it's omnipresent in us. The fear of not belonging, the fear of not earning enough or being enough or having enough status. So we focus on the parts of society that we have inherited and that we see around us are rewarded. So I was watching a program on telly last night, and the people in it, it's a documentary about actual people and actual events. Very talented, very committed, very dedicated, and disgustingly materialistic. And that's my judgment. Okay, I totally own that, because I know that's subjective. And I felt really irritated while I was watching this show, and I checked in with myself, and it was like, if my irritation had words, what would it say? And it would have said, I resent that this behavior is being rewarded with massive salaries and unbelievable adoration by millions of people across the world. That was the story that was going on inside of me and for me. And the rub for me is that for me it eclipsed their talent and their dedication and their discipline to their craft, to their sport. For me, was eclipsed by this gauche, really crass materialism and showing off. And so I digressed a little bit. Coming back to what you were saying, is the service of self largely in society, and again, particularly urban environments, the service of self and the fear, the innate fear, state of fear that service of self resides in, often unconsciously, is the climate. It's the norm versus the exception.
But I think also this is where we have to start at education and have to make our children see that things differently, and that you can only start there. That's the root of where things have to change. And I just wanted to, because I thought when you were speaking, I was thinking of the opera singer Sonny Boyd Ladla, South African opera singer. He lived in the Western Cape, very poor community. I think it was just him and his mum. Not sure, I can't remember the whole situation, but he sang in a choir, and he said that the choir singing sort of got him off the streets, and got him off all the negative things that goes around in that township. And with I think the only money he got on a bus when he was older, and he went to Cape Town and to go audition to the university, the music university. And he said he didn't have money to come back. So it was just that in faith that he really went to audition, and he got a place then. But that's that spirit, that spirit that I think that comes with him understanding, being part of a choir, understanding what he wanted to do, or had the vision of what he wanted to do. And then also then, of course, in Cape Town, there were people helping him financially. And it's that community, that sort of people appreciating art, appreciating what he can offer and his talent. And what you were saying about the Karoo, that's really what orchestra teaches you. That's what choir teaches you. That's looking out for each other, listening to the person next to you, waiting or being part of a group. And that's what these smaller communities do. They look out for each other. They support each other. If somebody starts a business, everybody goes to support them. People don't say, well, I'm not supporting because I don't want you to do well. Because they're a community, they want everybody to be well. They want everybody to do well.
Yeah, completely. I love the example of the orchestra, because you could use the orchestra as a metaphor for any group.
Yeah. And the choir as well.
Totally. And a principle that I used to use when in years past, when I used to work with a lot of music producers and sound engineers, there was a propensity to make. They really wanted loud records, and the principle, that's okay, but how you get loud records is counterintuitive, because if everything's loud, then nothing's loud, right? And if you use the metaphor of the orchestra, exactly as you've described it, listening, looking out for each other, taking care, participating, community. If you think of a department or a team in an organization that's not getting on, and their performance is poor because they just pissed off with each other, that would be like an orchestra that may well be made up of very talented individuals who are very competent on their respective instruments, all playing at the same time, at the same volume, because they want to teach everybody else in the orchestra a lesson that they're better than and more important than, and that their instrument and voice is all that matters. And then you can extrapolate that to dissonance in a family or in a neighborhood, or between cultures, etc. And what I'm busy off the back of a conversation that I had recently with Pepe Marais. We were engaging around the inherent complexities of businesses and managing performance and what is performance and who gets to decide, etc. And while Pepe was talking, a vivid image came into my mind, and that is of a microphone and a loudspeaker. And a microphone is what's referred to as an input transducer, and a loudspeaker is an output transducer. And how it works is a microphone receives an acoustic sound and translates that into an electrical voltage. Goes down the cable in the sound system, and the loudspeaker does exactly the inverse of that. So it translates the electrical voltage into acoustic sound. And the vivid image I had was that is such a beautiful illustration of an organization.
Yeah.
So at the input is where we have our culture, climate of the organization, and not what we do, but how we do it. Like, what inputs are we doing? The output, of course, is our reputation, our performance, and what we and the world see. But what happens is, in the middle of that sound system, there is a sort of coming together of all of that acoustic information. And oftentimes that's where the bottlenecks reside. And that's what I was talking about earlier, is my definition of an organization is it's the sum of it, sum of its bottlenecks and diverse perspectives. So diverse perspectives are a great thing if one is receptive to them. They can be a complete annoyance and inconvenience. And that's where the dissonance between two or more people resides, is when we have differences of opinion or differing opinions, and one or both of us is not prepared to avail our minds and our hearts, that it's just different. Different doesn't mean wrong.
Yeah.
But could it in fact be, if I take a breath and just settle down and stop trying to win, that what you are saying, proposing, suggesting, presenting may be a better fit than mine? And one of the beautiful things, since we're talking about art and we're talking about the art, the challenging art of the human condition. Many, many years ago, there's a band that I've loved since the 80s, and there was an interview with one of their guitarists in a guitar magazine. And the interviewer asked the guitar player, what is your approach to songwriting? And the guitar player, Marty Wilson Piper, who I'm delighted has become a very good friend of mine, thanks to the internet, said, we get together in the rehearsal room, and the best chord or phrase to translate what we are wanting to say is the one that's chosen.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter whose it is, because sometimes it will be Petrus, sometimes it will be David, sometimes it will be John, sometimes it will be Jane. And so, and I use that example deliberately because musical bands are notoriously dissonant. It's full of egos and inflexibility. That's often why great groups of creative people break up and never speak to each other again,
But
No.
yeah, but I'm thinking now that what you are doing, what your organization, what you're trying to do in the academic field is actually so important, because I think that the outflow of academic academic organizations that have that outlook of just business, they create these students that go out into business without that sort of that outlook of, it's not just about me, it's not just about the what's the word now, that it's not about just the performance, it's about how you do it and about how you work with other people together and what the outcome would be. So, and I think this is also, I did an interview yesterday with Chris Marnie. He's the director of the London City Ballet. And we were talking about this, where he says the ballet school, he was director of the ballet school as well. And he said there he knew, it's important to teach the technique and to have the good technique. But he also realized when these students go out and they go into a ballet company, they are performers. That's not necessarily the work that they're going to do. And this is so important in education, that when these people leave, they have to be performers. They have to perform in business. They don't have to be the same as the student that has to have the highest mark, or that has to be some sort of prize winner.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it comes back to, there's a concept that I developed by accident. I must add, I was writing an article many years ago, and out of my fingertips into the keyboard and onto the page came the principle of model versus teach.
Mm.
And so, to your point earlier about an organization, so an education provider that has a square focus on performance, other professional qualifications traditionally. Again, not a judgment, but
Yeah.
if that is the focus. One of the greatest challenges for business schools, particularly, but arguably all tertiary education providers, especially with the internet now, is if you are, as an organization, are not practicing what you teach, the students lose a lot of respect and trust in their educational experience with you.
Absolutely. Mm.
So do as I say, not as I do type of thing. That's problematic. And that, without digressing, that's another key element of our work at Learning Advisory, is to focus doggedly, pathologically, on the connection or disconnection between what is enacted and what is espoused. I'll qualify what I mean. So many organizations have a purpose and a vision, mission, and values. And oftentimes those are quite boring and vanilla in my experience, but be that as it may. And we make up our minds and make our choices, our decisions, based on how a person behaves, not what they espouse, but what they enact. Equally, organizations. So if our values are integrity, transparency, care, generosity, and we are not enacting those every single day in our organization, you have contradicted what you say you do with what you do actually do. Coming back to model versus teach. I find that teaching is often not the most effective way of imparting skills and behaviors. I know that's crazy coming from an educator who has an organization helping education providers. Bear with me. Let me use an example of punctuality. So let's say I am a manager and I have a couple of team members reporting to me, and one or more of them are regularly late. The conversation is totally appropriate. Hey, I'm noticing that, you're tardy, just checking what's going on. But to become autocratic and dictatorial about it, it's probably going to exacerbate the issue as opposed to employ, because you're going to just annoy the person regardless of what's going on for them already. And the point is that if I want to have a climate of punctuality as a sign of mutual respect for self and the rest of the group, it's imperative that I'm never late. And if I know I'm going to be late, which hopefully will be extremely seldom, I will give fair warning as a way of managing expectations. So I'm not late without prior announcement. And so model versus teach is that we watch intently. Often we're blown away by the observation and discernment skills of children, small children.
Yeah.
And domestic pets, cats and dogs, traditionally, probably other animals too. They're very, very, very observant. And so are adults. Even if we're pretending not to see or stare or whatever, we're all looking and we're all observing and we're all making up our minds about truths and realities all the time.
Exactly.
So what we often forget, it's just the same as I always want people to be honest with me, even if it's hurtful or unhinging feedback. But I'm not prepared to be honest with everybody else. I use that as an example, as a placeholder. So if I force somebody to do something, even if they're inherently conscientious and compliant by nature, it will build resentment. And if I keep doing that, it's going to build a lot of resentment. For people who want agency in their lives and their voice and their decision making and their participation, that will be a fast track to, we often talk about it as micromanagement. What's the point? Is I don't necessarily think you can teach continuous learning because it's a choice. You can definitely, through your behavior, you will be. If you're a continuous learner, and I appreciate there are probably 100 definitions of what that actually is. But if you are a continuous learner because that is important to you and that is an intentional way of being, your engagement and curiosity will be infectious to people who that resonates with, not with everybody. So being versus how you are when you are doing, as opposed to just what you're doing. Because high achievement is generally measured on your income and your net worth. And that is often where we lose our way. Because we start to focus on, and often in organizations we are measured on things that often drive poor behavior. That's why the whole performance planning and review cycle in most organizations, the whole KPI construct, it's dealt with such cynicism and inertia. Why it still continues at scale in businesses, I'm not sure.
But, you know, and I think students also sense when education systems or schools are treating them as individuals or you or in a way because sometimes you will hear children also say, no, the school's just interested in this, or the school just wants the numbers, or and you get that in organizations as well. People immediately sense when it's about the person or when it's about the company, and it's just the profits, and it's just about not really giving everybody a chance or using the talents and so on. People sense that,
Yeah, they do.
Mm.
And it's an and both, because what is easy to forget about, especially when you're cranky and resentful, two things. You are choosing to be there, and yes, you're going to blame a whole lot of I can't leave, and you have a choice to be there. Doesn't matter how you skin it. And you have to check out your own moral compass. Because if you don't want to be there and you're still there drawing a salary, and I know there are going to be a lot of listeners who probably don't appreciate what I'm about to say, is you have to check in with yourself. So I'm coming to work. I don't want to be here. And I have to, my fingers are making inverted commas, I have to be here. No, you don't. I appreciate the realities. Okay, that's not lost on me. But the brutal truth is that you have a choice. And you have to check in with yourself to go, okay, so I'm here drawing a salary and I'm being toxic and underperforming. That's not cool. And so the organization is the sum of the organization's purpose and related needs from its people. And of course, every individual and team has a role to contribute, and each individual and team wants acknowledgement, belonging, reward, and care, because they are human beings.
Exactly.
So it's both. And the organizations that thrive have a climate that is enacted, not on the website or on a wall or a poster outside the CEO's office, of the vision, mission, and values. We don't even have to really talk about our vision, mission, and values, because we can see them, feel them, smell them, hear them, and we're a part of it. It's not just them and they.
Exactly.
I am showing up with care and enthusiasm and participation and honesty, or whatever the values of that organization are, because I choose to. So it's a choice.
Wow, David, I can talk to you for hours. I love your outlook and what you're doing. It's amazing. I mean, really, and it's so needed. It should be really that every educational organization have to apply these principles that you're talking about.
Thanks, Petra. Yeah,
No, really.
I appreciate that. That's a wonderful affirmation.
No, I see, and I see that, and not just I think art education as well. I think it's so valuable that these organizations and because they also they need money to to be there, to exist, but that they also send out artists who are equipped to to follow their careers, you know. So I think it's in all aspects of life that this is so important. This outlook on education is so important.
Yeah.
But
Continuous
David,
learning.
yeah, but David, tell me what are your wishes for the future?
What an amazing question. They're combinations of for myself, and there are three components. It's wishes for myself, wishes for my partnership with Janine, my significant other, my wife, and wishes based on those two wishes for the world through my contribution, my small contribution. So I'll start with myself. I wish to be healthy and I wish to not become cynical, particularly in times of political and by association societal upheaval in my own country and in the world. I wish to not be binary about my art and creativity, but have it inherent, innate in everything I do, from the grocery shopping
Amazing.
to playing guitar, writing music, writing poetry, you know, doing what I do with everybody in my life that I do it with, people that I already know and people that I hope I will meet as I go. For my relationship with my wife, I wish for our partnership to never lose its intentionality.
Beautiful.
That come what may, is while the world and aspects of it in our lives will come and go, we are the golden thread, and that requires acknowledgement and deep care. And then for the world, I wish for a world that is less incumbent to privilege, power, and rank, and the disproportionate voice that comes with that. Again, in families, in neighborhoods, in organizations, in towns and cities, villages, and the world at large. I'm tired of the senior most person, and I say person singular because that's often where it is, with a business owner or a CEO or a president holding the disproportionate influence of what we do and don't do around here. And I'll conclude by saying that I'm really inspired by the wisdom of people and the wisdom of nature.
Oh, yes, absolutely. No, absolutely. But David, what beautiful wishes, really. You've really touched me now. This is really thought of wishes and apply to many people as well. I wish you really wonderful day and much success with what you are doing. I really think this is such a great business or project or business. I don't know if you can call it a project, but it seems like it's a sort of a thing that you have to also re-educate people on education.
Yeah. The learning advisory is a purpose. And it's not an individualistic, heroic purpose. And living and serving, being in service of that purpose is through projects.
Yeah.
And what I love about the context of this conversation with you today, Petra, and I'm so grateful for this, by the way. I love this kind of conversation because it helps me to sharpen my pencil about what I say, why I say it, and how I say it. Because words matter, as my colleague Frank McGuegue says. Words matter. It's something that I was asked recently. I was approached by a book publisher. And their representative asked me, have you considered writing a book? And I said, yes, I have. The response was, about what? And I said, a memoir. And I had a lot of mind talk about memoirs, such as arrogant, overused thing. Like, who am I anyway in the world? So my core beliefs get in there and are very convincing. But sticking to the story. And this lady asked great questions. And she said, what would be the reason for this book? And this is my way of concluding. Because I hadn't until this conversation tied the two pieces together. And I responded, catharsis for self and helpfulness for others.
Oh, yeah. And that's a great reason.
Yeah. And I think that most art is driven by one or both. And the one might not always be catharsis for self, but helpfulness for others, and etc. But a combination of that, catharsis for self and helpfulness for others, and that is what learning advisory is. We as learning advisory are educators, continuous learners, business people, partners, fragile, anxiety-prone human beings in the world. So it's not like we are coming. I always think of learning advisory and my writing and my music and Co-Curious, my podcast, as living things. I have high standards, but I stopped trying to be perfect. I for the first 50 years of my life, I was on this constant quest for perfection, and I haven't lost high standards, but I don't waste time on the perfection, because now I know and I embrace that everything that I do, including myself and the world around me, is a work in progress.
Exactly.
And so that's what this organization is. We are sense-making, we are grappling, we are creating, we are laughing, we are bewildered. And so it's not like we are the all-knowing genius organization that's coming to help fix you and your problems. I think that's completely disingenuous. We are a thinking partner who comes with deep experience of many organizations through our work. not because we're special. And our clients have deep experiences of their own organization and probably many other organizations, because many of the people we work with haven't only worked in that organization, and they're citizens of the world. And so how we approach the work is we conduct a diagnostic review when we first start working with a client, either for the first time or on a new frontier. We conduct the diagnostic review together. Not us doing it in this kind of slightly weird, icky, clandestine way, and then giving you an arbitrary to-do list. No, we do it together. And what we seek out, oftentimes we're engaged by the executive of an organization, or the executive strata. The folks we really want to work with, though, are generally the middle tier people who have full responsibility and limited authority. And the reason is because they have responsibility for people reporting into them, students, staff, parents, clients, etc. And they have an equally significant responsibility for reporting up on what are we doing, why are we doing it, and the performance thereof. And so what I'm doing is to enact what I wish in the world for more of in the world, and that is less obstruction, quite frankly, by privilege, power, and rank, and more agency and insight and actual freaking yumminess.
Yeah.
Not because executives can't. I mean, often they can. That's why they're there, right? But they're not the only constituency that has deep insight around their organizations. And sometimes they can be quite removed, not because they're bad people or negligent, but because of their role. You know, so leaders of education environments often are not in classrooms hours and hours all day and assessing, you know, tests and exams and assignments and reflection papers, etc. So they can't be. They're doing other things.
Exactly.
So to get those diverse perspectives, and particularly from the people who are engaging with the what that organization does. I'll leave you with this last little nugget. Last week I hosted Professor Eddie Obeng on Co-Curious, and he uses the metaphor this is for educational design, of a wedding followed by a marriage. And he said one of the greatest challenges, this was in response to my question of what does he attribute the common imbalance between learning and commercial priorities to. And he said that the common context is we focus on the wedding with no attention to the marriage. And he said, if you have a wedding, if you have your wedding and you don't focus on the marriage, you get divorced.
Yeah.
I'll conclude
that's a great way of explaining it.
Yeah, totally is.
No, absolutely. But David, thank you so much for your time. It was so wonderful to talk to you.
It was really my greatest pleasure. Thank you for yours. And I hope it's not the last time we
definitely
conversate.
Yeah, definitely. No, I can talk to you for hours, definitely.